Now I'm excited to introduce our speaker. Garrett Barujan is Chief Development Officer and Managing Partner of Wave Capital Partners, LLC. Garrett is responsible for strong business development at Wave Capital. Nationally recognized for his work, Garrett has the unique ability and remarkable history of creating and maintaining key business relationships in high-profile public and private environments. His extensive media background, which includes working for notable organizations such as ESPN Inc. and NBC Universal Inc., has afforded Garrett the time and space to build quality relationships in news and sports media, proving especially beneficial for a number of Wave Capital's high-profile clients. This year, Garrett has been featured in Yahoo News, Yahoo Finance, Fox Business Network, Forbes, TD Ameritrade Network, Leverage.com, ReadWrite, Thrive Global, and CEO World, as well as a high-profile podcast interviews for Wave Capital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. Later this month, Garrett is scheduled to interview Tim Brando, Mike Hill, and Len Elmore. Welcome, Garrett. I will hand the webinar controls over to you now.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Greatly appreciated. Welcome, everybody. I look forward to speaking with you today about the financial consultancy that you can educate your children on, that you can hopefully take my advice and utilize your own best decision-making policies for yourself, what works best for you and your family. And also, I'm looking forward to discussing with you about human capital, investing in yourself, allowing you to invest in your future. And yes, as Stacy has mentioned, I am the Chief Development Officer and Managing Partner of Wave Capital Partners, based in Orlando, Florida. I've been at the company for over 7 years. My father, Ray Barujan, is our Chairman and CEO of Wave Capital, and he and I run the daily operations of our investment banking consultancy firm. We're nationally recognized, and we have clients in about 10 US states across the country, and we facilitate capital funding to fund real estate and non-real estate projects and in other spaces as well. So we'll begin, and again, it's a pleasure being with the St. John's University alumni and business community leaders. So part one of my discussion with you today, raising financially fit children. It all starts with the basics, the value of a dollar. And I'd like to provide some anecdotes throughout my presentation as a way for me to be relatable to you all and find relevance in my presentation. Learning the basics, value of a dollar. I remember growing up, my sister and I, you remember even your childhoods where you get allowances from parents or grandparents, and maybe they give you $1 and they say, see what you can buy with it or see if you can save it. And, growing up, never really valued a dollar the way I do now. And it's pretty simple, but a profound statement, valuing a dollar. And we've heard the widely used phrase, a penny saved is a penny earned. And it's pretty true. When you have money and it's in your bank account and you're saving it for a rainy day, you should consider keeping it in your bank account unless you have a desire to purchase something that you definitely need rather than definitely what you don't need. Needs are different than wants, and I talk about that later in my presentation. But growing up, having a conservative type of viewpoint about saving money or spending money, it came natural to me, and obviously observing what my peers were doing, or even growing up and seeing how my family valued a dollar. And I got great experiences, if you will, of seeing how my family ran a household, how my parents ran a household, and really being taught the value of a dollar. And I would advise you, when it comes to having conversations early on with your children, that they should learn basic finance by the time they're in high school. They should know beyond just obviously adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. I mean, they really should know what it means to invest or what it means to finance. What does it mean to think about their financial future and hoping that it's, prosperous and having the stability and the security to make good decisions. And it all starts with a judicious mind. It also starts with, life-changing experiences as well, and experiences that they'll begin to have if they start with a part-time job or even a full-time job, even if it's something that is not going to be their career in the future. Getting that early experiences, whether it's working for retail, whether it's working the fast casual dining space, whether it's doing any type of maybe manual labor, if that is something that they think would be beneficial, or if that's what you would think would be beneficial for them, learning what hard work is, not only in the physical sense but in the mental sense, utilizing your human capital too, which I talk about later on in the presentation. But learning about entrepreneurship, as early as high school and no later than college. I think back to my high school days, and I wish that there was a basic entrepreneurship program at my high school. I went to a college preparatory school, but I wish that there was, beyond just having to take algebra or geometry or pre-calculus and courses similar along those lines, but a basic 101, intro to entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Some people favor more of the corporate life, but I think that if you have some type of balance of experiences in corporate America and knowing what it's like to run a small business and utilize all the creative elements that you think are possible, and there are never any limits. There are always, unlimited, untapped potential for any person. And I think that it's important that you understand that your children, their experience is going to shape who they are, and it's going to shape how they feel about making, financial decisions as they get older and want to raise families of their own. And so I think that you should have those type of conversations with your children. I think it would be very beneficial as they get into their teen years and their early 20s. And I think that it will also give you a sense of pride and purpose to know that you are steering your children on the right track. And it was interesting that before I thought about speaking about this topic, I always was fascinated about the way millennials think, because I'm a millennial. I'm 33 years old, and I'm in that classification, if you will, who grew up in the social media age, and the economy is always changing. It's changing all the time, and it's pretty rapid. And I thought this study from Bank of America was very interesting. In 2020, 73% of millennials in this millennial report from 2020 comparing to 2018, and this is from last year, so it's about a 10-month-old study, that 73% of millennials are saving compared to 63% in 2018. 59% of millennials have $15,000 or more in savings, and compared that to 2018 with 47%. 24% of millennials have $100,000 or more in savings compared to 16% in 2018. And you can attribute it to perhaps the mindsets changing because of the pandemic, and children, or if you will, people my own age, millennials, if I'm talking to an audience, people in their 50s and 60s, I would probably be in the same age group as your children, maybe a little bit younger. The pandemic really shaped everybody's life. And I think that that study, that coincides with the time of the pandemic all throughout last year, really had people thinking much differently than pre-COVID-19. So I think that it's a study that I would think that you would find interesting and want to read more about. It's important to talk to your children about various topics, including but not limited to the economy, understanding how the economy works, understanding about job creation, understanding about real estate, understanding about the stock market, very different than real estate. Some people like to invest in the stock market. Others find investing in real estate to be maybe a safer or more predictable form of investment, although there are no guarantees in life in anything. But real estate is something tangible that you can see. And I think that there are more comparable type of real estate investments one can look to. And I would imagine that people who like the stock market would have their own viewpoints of what makes that type of investment what's best for them. And these are all personal decisions. So my presentation is not to sway one way or the other. It's to educate and to inform and give my thought processes and allowing the audience to make what decisions are best for them and their families. It's important for your children to understand about equity, which is an investment, debt, which is a loan, understanding about public policy issues, whether it's the infrastructure bill, the reconciliation bill that's being discussed on Capitol Hill, understanding about supply chain disruption that everybody in the United States and across the globe are experiencing, understanding about other type of public policy issues that are discussed on Capitol Hill, and how it affects you at home in your local areas, your businesses, your livelihoods, your families. Understanding about philanthropy and nonprofits, understanding for your children to understand about COVID-19 and the effects and talk about it and have an open discussion about, how do they feel about the pandemic? How has it shaped their mindsets on what they value in terms of, a career and maybe making a difference, how to make other people's situations better, not just thinking about yourself, but thinking about others and how to improve the lives of others. And that's a very philanthropic, mindset. The Great Recession of '08, that was a pretty challenging time, from 2007, 2008 up until probably 2012, 2013, when I was graduating from college. I remember getting a degree in journalism and mass communication from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I just remember so many jobs were lost. So many people were furloughed from the journalism industry, the media industry, and that has come a long way. And you can say that about a lot of other industries that had to start over or had to reinvent themselves and had to find some type of creative mechanisms to, jumpstart, a business or an industry again. Corporate America is different than entrepreneurship, as I mentioned. And so they understand children, kids, millennials, even younger generations, Gen Z. COVID-19 was such an unprecedented time in American history. First time in 100 years going through a pandemic, let alone a pandemic like this one. And I think that having an open conversation with your children about how they felt about the pandemic, causes, concerns, anxieties, stressors, what their mindset was, going in, how they felt during it and coming out after it, because it probably most likely shaped their mindset and their views on what type of career do they want. Is it something that's more philanthropic or is it more capitalistic? What decisions can they make for their financial future, knowing that our economy is changing all the time? And is a corporate America position, at a major company, something that they would be interested in, or running a small business as an entrepreneur? Whatever they feel is the best solution for them will probably also be shaped by, what is going around in the world or and around them. I mean, essentially, because what we're dealing with, and I get it into in the next bullet point, supply chain disruption is affecting our economy here in America and around the globe. High rising costs, low supply, surging demand, bottlenecks with our supply chains where inventory can't get out to major retail stores or grocery stores, and online shopping has not been what it used to be, and people having to wait for packages to be delivered, starting Christmas shopping early. Those things, are interesting, that millennials who really, love the latest and greatest type of, products and services, but they're also thinking about how do we save and cut costs, and they should be thinking that way. They should be thinking about how to be more conservative, from a financial perspective, because it is harder to make a living now. It is harder to save now. And to be able to have those conversations with your children about what's happening in the world today, how is it affecting you and your children here at home, and making the best decisions. Nobody can make the decisions for your children, but utilizing your experiences and how you feel as a parent or a loved one and how you can best advise your children are the type of conversations that should be happening. And again, whether your family has the right financial planners or the right accountants to also utilize as resources, your children should understand those type of relationships as well, because they have to be able to, as they get older and as they choose their careers and as they decide on what type of resources do they want to utilize and go to make sure they're accessible and make sure they know how to maximize those type of relationships, because all those respective groups and industries and professionals, they have those expertises that will be able to benefit your children as they get older. And we live in a complex 24/7 world. It's not simple by any means, and you have a lot of things that can be distracting. Social media, people posting a lot, people, constantly having so much stimuli that's in their realm of day-to-day life. And it's important to limit the distractions, to make sure your children are focused, and each day always improving as a citizen, as a student, as a career-oriented person. Your brand is everything, your reputation is everything. And I think that when your children start thinking a little bit more conservatively about how they should, structure their days and how they should invest their time, and we talk about human capital, but also understanding, again, the value of a dollar and understanding how far money can stretch nowadays, and understanding also where they can see themselves perhaps 12 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, always having goals, and knowing where and what type of stature they would like from a financial perspective of being in a situation where they can have financial security and prosperity, which I talk about that later on in the presentation. And the last example I have on the slide is, because of that current global supply chain disruption, and we're seeing inflation in our country today, your children are affected by that too. If they're trying to buy a certain product or utilize a certain service or whatever the case may be, when they're on their own at college and maybe they have a part-time job, or maybe that they're wanting to save up money to, have the capital to spend on certain things that are necessarily needed for them, not just wants, but needs, which I talk about later too, it does definitely have an effect on them. And I think that having those type of conversations too can get them more situated in their thinking of how do I make the best decision for me. And so I'll go on to the next slide, which is part 2, growing your wealth. And I believe I did get a question from someone. I'm happy to answer that at the end of the webinar. So thank you so much for your question. Where should you invest your hard-earned money? And, again, I mentioned it earlier. Is it real estate? Is it in the stock market? Is it the bond market, cryptocurrency? All these areas are unique in their own way. And whether you want to invest in either one of these areas to enhance and diversify your portfolio of investments, please, I recommend to talk to a financial planner, talk to a financial advisor. Very similar roles, but there are some differences too. Make an investment that you think is the smartest type of investment by being more conservative and not necessarily, putting the cart before the horse and thinking that you might be able to, bite off more than you can chew, which never works. Always study current events, always be well read, always seek out the expertise of lawyers or accountants, financial advisors and planners, because the more wealth of experience that can be imparted on from other individuals will help shape your mindsets on what's the best decision for you and your children. And I think that it's again, an open conversation that needs to be discussed amongst families, and the sooner the better with your children, because financial freedom and security and prosperity are so very important, especially in an ever-changing, diverse economy that really we see rapid changes throughout the weeks and the months and the quarters. I talk about, yes, consulting with a financial advisor or planner. Building credit equals building credibility. If you have what is considered to be a long-standing history of credit and having strong credit, whether it's paying your credit card off every month, whether it's owning a home, owning a car, any type of assets that you can have, and any type of financial stability that you can show with tenure at a job, it's going to show in the financial world, it's going to show that you have strong credit and you have credibility to make good on your payments and to have the financial responsibility to be able to multitask and accomplish a lot of things that require you to always meet your financial obligations every month. I looked at a study and I wanted to share with you from NerdWallet and joined with the Harris poll. And this was recently, September 2021, more than 2,000 Americans were surveyed. And the writer, Amanda Barrasso, and her team at NerdWallet, they had figured out that since March of 2020, when the pandemic started, that when it came to your credit score, that 47% of Americans think that keeping some balance on their credit card is better than paying off the balance completely every month. Well, according to NerdWallet, they feel that the American people who feel that way are not thinking exactly how they should. NerdWallet suggests and recommends that it's best to pay the balance in full to avoid any type of accumulating interest. Paying your credit card maybe a few times a month, showing a strong credit history by doing a little each month to pay off that balance and not keep it in there on a monthly basis. And keeping your credit utilization low, which is a term that they recommend that or suggest is a way for you not to have to think that you have to use a certain amount of capital a month on, spending on your credit card, that you should only use it when you necessarily need it the most. And I think that it's important that people, young millennials, older generations, doesn't matter the age, it's important to really establish a long credit history and to feel that you are improving each month, each year in establishing good credit. You should always try to live below your means, I would say, but also take healthy risks. And what I mean by healthy risks is that you want to be able to make smart investments or go outside of your comfort zone to still be of a judicious mind and still think things through, not be very haphazard in your thinking, or to be pragmatic, because you don't want to be pragmatic. You want to establish an ideology when it comes to money. If you want to be more on the conservative side, then take a more conservative approach. If you want to be more where you are okay with spending a little more than you think you should, but you think that in the long run it's going to work out in your best interests, then get the proper guidance and counsel from people who you trust in your professional network. And I talk about your professional network a little bit later in the presentation. It's all about the relationships. It's all about strength in numbers, having the right people around you. People may not necessarily agree with you, and you may not necessarily agree with them, but to be able to, have a meeting of the minds, so to speak, and at the end of the day, it's going to be your personal choice of how you want to spend your money. And I think that it's very important that you're the final arbiter of that decision, but also take the proper counsel. So if you can find a passion and you can monetize it, enjoy it, because it's very important that you are able to capitalize on multiple revenue streams, which I talk about later, and not to single yourself to or isolate yourself to one revenue stream. And that's where the entrepreneurship and creativity comes in. And again, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be creative. You can be creative in a corporate America environment setting on leadership teams or executive teams, and you're making an impact on a daily basis at your respective corporation. So whether you're a small business owner or work in maybe a philanthropic environment, or work for your state or local government or the federal government, or you're working for a corporation, if you feel like you're having purpose in what you do, and you feel like you are really making a difference, not for yourself, your family, but for others, that's a purposeful life, and it makes you feel good that you are making a difference and adding to the bottom line. You should think more like a customer than a consumer. We're all going to be, consumers of information, or maybe we're consumers of different types of products or services. Be an educated consumer, right? But just because you're a consumer of something doesn't necessarily mean that you are a customer. And you should be a customer more so than a consumer. We're all consumers, but to be a customer, that requires a level of sales or convincing on other people's parts to make you think that you have to buy this product. You have to utilize this service. You have to take this trip, But we live in a world today of sales, and we do live in a world today where people have to make a living. And it doesn't matter what industry you work in, the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry, the sports industry, the airline industry, people who, work in any type of environment where they have to sell a product or service to, provide for their families, put food on the table, to have a quality of life. But you would hope that they do it in the most genuine means possible, and that they are worthy of your attention and of your time and of the financial means to go out and purchase a product or utilize a service. And you feel like that it's in your best interest to, hear what they have to say and also make that type of, investment. That's how it should be. And if there's transparency and communication amongst groups, whether they're on the sales side or the buy side, so to speak, you should always think of how to best, go about looking at being a customer rather than just a consumer. And your needs are always your wants, but your wants are not always your needs. And I think we all know that. Do you need it or do you want it? And when push comes to shove and you don't have as much capital, let's say, that you could afford to give out, let's say you're going through a financial difficulty, let's say, or you're going through some type of financial hardship, your wants take a back seat, your needs, the essentials, food, water, shelter. I mean, if that was, the desperate of times, and, there are people who have experienced those times, and there are people who have come back through strength and determination and a willingness to reinvent themselves and no matter the financial hardship or no matter if there's a recession or a pandemic, the strongest people do survive. And it's so important to have those relationships. And the relationships are what you're going to need to get you through those tough times. And that's the biggest, point I can make, on this slide is, knowing that if you can utilize all your resources and all the relationships you have, you're going to be okay. And to never stop learning and never stop growing, because it's required to be successful, and also to always think judiciously when it comes to your finances. And before you think about yourself, think about your family first and your career second, because the best business plan you can ever have, the person you marry, the family you raise. And if your family and your spouse, if they're good, if they're in a good mindset, if everyone in your family is on the same page and everybody has a healthy outlook on life and on finances and just having the essentials, the needs, then you can lend yourself to looking at your wants, incentives of, taking an extra trip, spending a little extra money on clothing or a certain type of, products or services that are not necessary on a day-to-day basis, but enhance the, experience of living a much better or more quality of life. But that's all subjective. And again, the point I want to make here is, financial prosperity begins with financial stability in the household. And that's the most important thing that you should always think about, is start with the home first. Make sure your home life is in a good place. And if it's in a good place and everybody in your family is on the same page, then each day will always get easier, and to set goals with your family too. What do we want to accomplish in 3 months, in 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And again, it all goes back to having an open conversation with your family, with your children, about the value of a dollar and the value of making the right investment. And that, I think, is the most important thing of all. And again, I'll answer questions at the end of the webinar, and we're going to go on to part 3. So human capital is so important. And I think that it's more of an art rather than a science. It's investing in you to invest in your future. And think about that statement, investing in you to invest in your future. Human capital is going to be your best investment. It's your God-given abilities. It's your talents. It's what you have innately inside of you that is going to determine the success that you're going to have. You could be the smartest person in the world, hypothetically. You could have the best of educations. You could have the best mentors around you, the best intelligence around you. But if you don't have that work ethic, if you don't have that passion and perseverance, then you're not going to be able to achieve your professional goals as quickly or as efficiently or as exponentially as you have or had initially contemplated. And I want to talk about this poll first before I jump ahead. The personal capital and the Harris poll back, in August 2021 of this year, 66% of Americans would like to change their jobs. 91% of those are Generation Z, 78% of those are millennials, 47% of those are Generation X, 45% are baby boomers. And that's really telling because, it used to be, my parents' time, my grandparents' time, you would stay in a job for a long period. You might stay at that job, which happens to be your career, for 30, 35, 40 years, and then you retire, perhaps maybe at the age of 65, or maybe a little bit longer than that if you had a desire to work. But that's not how it's been now, or even the last 10 to 15 years. And, when I think about myself as a millennial, how much job turnover I've seen even since I graduated from college back in 2010. I've been 11 years now, 11 and a half years in the professional workforce. And it is interesting to me that, and I've had that experience too, but maybe my experiences, compared to others might be a little bit different. And when I say that, I've seen fellow millennials who, after maybe a year, 18 months, 2 years, they're on to their next job. And then maybe they're on to their next job a year or two after that. And then a year or two after that. And it used to be where I thought coming out of college that, wow, your first job out of college, it's best to be there 4 or 5 years before you make a move. Now I think that has dramatically just decreased. And again, I don't think there's any poll that is going to be as accurate as the next one, because again, we're in an ever-changing economy. Things are always changing all the time. Personal circumstances can affect whether one person or another wants to change their job. And for personal reasons, or maybe there's economic or financial hardship or job relocation, or maybe a medical issue or illness. So you can't fault perhaps the things that can't be controlled of why somebody has to change their job. But if it's based upon the things that you can control, we have seen that times are getting tougher. It is harder to make a living now. And I think it goes back to when you live in a 24-hour, 7 days a week news cycle, and especially with the rise of social media going back almost 20 years, and how that really has shaped the way people think and how they advertise their businesses or how they connect with others, and redefining the social spheres of our lifetime currently, and relationships that are generated more online first than opposed to in person. Those things are changing the way people think, and people are looking for more leisure opportunities. And I think it's also because they don't want to be burnt out from their working environments that are pretty strenuous. And I thought that in this poll, it's interesting that 75% of all people in this poll would rather work the same number of hours in a 4-day work week compared to a typical 5-day work week where they would be working the same number of hours. 58%, of Generation Z feels that way. Millennials, 77%. Gen X, 79%. Baby boomers, 78%. And, it doesn't surprise me. And I'd be curious if it surprises you or not, because I think that, again, we are seeing a fundamental shift in the behaviors, in the way people learn and the way people grow within their respective jobs and their careers, and looking for ways to work smarter rather than, working harder. And I think that goes a long way in shaping the minds of people, because if they love what they do, you've heard that expression, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work, and I'm paraphrasing that. Well, not everybody has the benefit of finding their passion, early on in life. It can be rediscovered or discovered. It can be discovered when they're younger, and then they have to take a back seat on it because they have other obligations, and then get to rediscover later, or it may not get discovered until later on. I mean, for me, I graduated with a journalism and mass communication degree. I worked as an intern on Capitol Hill for a U.S. congressman. I worked as a production assistant at ESPN, worked as a assignment desk assistant at the NBC News Bureau in Washington. I was doing contract work, being an independent sports broadcaster for high school and junior college sports. Then I decided to get my real estate licenses, and that was my intro to basic finance and understanding about real estate and investment opportunities and being financially sound as a professional, and learning about real estate brokerage, even though I found out it wasn't my forte. And then I saw that there was a need in 2014, 4 years after college graduation, to work with my father, join forces with him, grow our small business. And now we represent clients, and we have so in the last 7 years that I've been at the company, but the company predates me, to be able to facilitate capital financing and equity investment to fund our clients' large or small commercial applications, whether real estate or non-real estate, whether it's tech, whether it's energy, whether it's hospitality or sports or logistics and manufacturing related type of companies. And so it really taught me personally that your company, although it's yours, it's bigger than you. It's all about helping others and helping your clients and impacting the local economy. And deals that can get funded can create jobs in the local area, can transform the lives of people who live in that area. And to be able to do that in a substantial way across the country, that's purpose. I mean, that's a passion. And to utilize my journalism background to be able to have speaking opportunities like this where I can educate an audience is really important for me. And I hope that you find this presentation helpful to you because I love connecting with others. And again, as I mentioned, strong work ethic, passion, and perseverance are required to achieve your professional goals. You know, you want to gain financial independence and that security, to have the financial literacy and the responsibility. Well, you need the financial literacy and the responsibility first before you can gain financial independence and security, because you need to understand how basic economics work, how basic finance works, how to be responsible. It's as simple as, again, do you value a dollar? How do you value your time? How do you value the knowledge that you accumulate on a daily or weekly basis, personally or professionally? How do you value professional relationships? How do you value finding business opportunities? Maybe you're a business development officer like me. You constantly have to be going out there, putting yourself out there, and really tapping into as many resources as you can in your respective industries or similar industries that are comparable or that overlap with your industry, to try to have the right people around you and the right resources around you to be a more successful business owner, or even successful in a corporate environment, because you only are one person, and conserving and managing your energy and your time management is key. You're going to have to sustain that for a lifetime, because if you're able to multitask and working smarter rather than working harder, that's the best way to accumulate wealth, and not just monetarily, but also accumulate wealth within yourself, which is that human capital. Because if you have strong human capital, something that can't be taken away from you, the passion, desire, the perseverance, you'll do whatever it takes to be successful and to make sure you're successful and your family is thriving. And it all begins with family. Growing up, I'm sure you and your families, your grandparents, your parents, family was the strongest institution. And now family structures change for various reasons. But if you can still implement those type of values, and I'm sure a lot of you do, when it comes to raising your children, that they understand even some of those old school principles that you had to learn growing up, because that is lost on some families and individuals nowadays. And it's important to never lose what worked back in the day, even though we live in a completely different decade and time period. And again, the economy has changed, the workforce has changed, people have changed, their behaviors have changed, their interests have changed. But that doesn't mean that it has to change you. It doesn't mean that it has to change your thinking. And I, credit my upbringing, because I had traditional parents who taught my sister and I the value of a dollar and the value of, what it means to save money and to spend it when it was wise to spend it, but not do it frivolously. And it's never too late to start teaching your children those principles if you haven't done so already. And again, creating multiple revenue streams while still maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Life is all about balance. You can't drink too much water, you can't drink too little water. You can't have too much sleep, but you can't have no sleep. It has to be a balance. You can't overwork, but you also can't underwork. So it's important to know about balance. And again, professional networking, business development, relationship building. Pride yourself on strong relationships. Go out there, network at your local chamber of commerce. I used to serve on the board of a local chamber of commerce way back when in the city of Charlotte, the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, and networking was great, meeting individuals from all walks of life. It's the great teacher to talk to people, hear their stories, learn about them, learn about their families, learn about their careers. It's going to shape your mindsets and to help you become a more successful person. You know, business development is strong attribute you must have because you want to create opportunities, new opportunities for your small business, and to always create and innovate and never stop learning. And again, relationship building is so key. And seek out the human capital and others as well. As I mentioned, you know, everybody comes from different, you know, backgrounds, have different upbringings. And again, an hour-long conversation with somebody or a 2-hour-long conversation with somebody, opposed to only sporadically talking to them throughout the year, night and day difference. You know, really spend the time with people. And mentors are lifelong confidants, and they're going to be great resource of information. And to have those professional connections with them and anybody they introduce you to. You always need to have mentors. And one of my greatest mentors, I just spoke with him on the phone the other day. I've had him since 17. He's my former high school American history teacher. We started a nonprofit together my senior year in high school. He encouraged me to, you know, run for student body president. I ended up becoming freshman class president in college because I even saw at the age of 18, what are other 18-year-olds thinking about? And I wanted to serve my freshman class at the university. And it was very important for me early on to know how other millennials thought and how they think. And to still have those relationships to this day and see how everybody has really focused on their careers and focused on raising their families and really finding time to even give back to their local communities. You need to have an all-encompassing life to be financially fit, you know, to understand, again, how basic economic and business principles work, to know what a smart investment is for you and your families, and always never stop learning and never stop growing your human capital. And with that, I'll open up to questions before we conclude today.
Great. Thank you, Garrett. The one question I see is, what is your opinion on cryptocurrency?
You know, it's a very interesting question. I honestly have only read about cryptocurrency from afar. I personally know people who have been invested in the space and have done quite well. I would recommend that you educate yourself on cryptocurrency, talk to people in the space, learn about why they find it to be interesting, why they find it to be relevant and important in today's society, because it definitely has caught on the attention of a lot of people, and there are a lot of investors in that space. So it's such a great question. And again, I know a few people personally who have really been adamant about being involved in the space and have done quite well in the space. And, you know, that's great for them. I personally don't have any insight or history with cryptocurrency, but just like any industry, just like any topic, with my journalism background and my experiences, you know, think like an investigative reporter, you know, think like a journalist, do your research, do your homework, ask questions, really educate yourself, because at the end of the day, if you feel like, based upon all the people you talk to in the cryptocurrency world, if you feel like you're getting reassurance that, hey, this is something that's good for me, then find it within yourself to make a decision whether you want to pursue it or not. And if you feel that after talking to a lot of people and doing more studying on it, that you say to yourself, you know, it might not be for me, well, then that's okay too, because you do what you're comfortable with. And I appreciate the question. And happy to answer any more questions. My contact information is below, my email address, my cell phone number, my work number. I'm glad to connect with you all on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Again, as Stacy mentioned, you know, featured in Yahoo Finance, Forbes, Fox Business Network, TD Ameritrade Network. You know, please feel free to, read some of the articles I contributed to, or that I've been featured in, or some of my broadcasts. I hope it's helpful. I always like being a source of information and insight. And I always love connecting with different people and other thought leaders and other business professionals, because it definitely helps and enhances what I do on a daily basis in the capital markets consulting world. And I'm really happy that I'm a part of this St. John's University Alumni webinar series. And I really thank you, Stacy, for hosting this event. And I'm happy to answer any more questions with the remaining time that we have today.
The last question I see here is, do you have any suggested readings to assist in the pursuit of financial literacy?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I think that, really study, an economist's perspective. One of my relationships is the former chief economist of Wells Fargo. I had the benefit of meeting him several years ago, still stay in touch with him, a friend of mine. If you can have access to friends in the economics, the economist community, it's good to talk to an economist. It's good to talk to a lawyer. It's good to talk to a financial planner or an advisor. Publications, whether it's Yahoo Finance, or whether it's the Financial Times, or whether it's Bloomberg or CNBC or Fox Business, or, I come from the journalism world. So all these major media outlets, PBS or the Associated Press, or, look at all these different publications and outlets to really gain a financial understanding and working knowledge of, what you think would be a good way to educate yourself. Constantly read, constantly look at all the financial, publications, or maybe there's, white pages on certain topics, and really understand economics and business, but understand it, that it's just a small part of what is going on in the world, because finance and economics are also tied to, public policy related issues, and understanding public policy related issues and where you might stand one way or the other on critical issues that are affecting the way of life today. You'll probably see, based upon your opinions and thoughts, based upon what you read, that will shape you into leaning more towards certain publications or certain media outlets, and do it in a way that you're thinking more objectively than subjectively. It's easy to be subjective, because once you're subjective, you've already formed an opinion. But if you think objectively at first and really take a step back and absorbing what you're reading, then you're really going to get a sense of, how can I, take my viewpoints, but do it or shape them in a way that it's not compromising the actual facts and the actual figures and what's really going on. And the more viewpoints and the more people you talk to, and the more facts and figures that you accumulate, and facts and figures that you accumulate based upon research that you do, where that the information you're getting at is from a credible source, it's going to just build up a working knowledge of information that you can always go back to, which is yourself. And again, it's a great question about, enhancing financial literacy and where to go. Look at any major business media outlet, find maybe a commentator or a speaker that you identify with, try to, register for webinars like these, and to really, again, go to, trade shows, go to panelist discussions, be guests in the audience, remotely, because we're still going through somewhat of a pandemic. Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you, everyone. Feel free to connect if you have any more questions. Take care and have a great day.
Take care.